Sister cleaned out my joint savings account, forged my name on a property transfer form, and boarded a flight to Portugal, all while I was sitting in a hospital waiting room praying my daughter would be okay. I thought I had nothing left. Then my 17-year-old son looked up from his laptop and told me he had already started fixing it. 3 days later, my sister called me from Lisbon screaming so hard I had to hold the phone away from my ear. Have you ever been the one who holds everything together for everyone else, only to realize they were leaning on you so hard they actually pushed you off a cliff? Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love knowing who's part of this community. My name is Audrey, I'm 34 years old, and I have spent the better part of a decade building something I was genuinely proud of. I'm a licensed mortgage broker in Vancouver, British Columbia. I know that doesn't sound glamorous. It's not supposed to. It means I understand numbers the way some people understand music, instinctively in my bones before I even have to think about it. I built my client base from scratch, referral by referral, late night by late night, skipping vacations and birthday parties and all the small moments that pile up into a life when you're not paying attention. I built it because I had to. After my divorce, I was the only income for my son and me, and I was not about to let either of us drown. The joint account was a mistake I made 2 years ago, and I knew it even when I made it. My sister. I'll call her exactly what she is because there's no softening this. Convinced me that we should pool some resources to buy our mother a small condo in Burnaby as a surprise retirement gift. My mother had spent 30 years cleaning other people's houses, and the idea of giving her a place that was actually hers made me cry in a good way for the first time in years. I put in $240,000. My sister put in 40. She said she'd contribute more once her situation stabilized. Her situation, as it turned out, had been unstable for a very long time, and I had just never let myself see it clearly. I should have seen the signs. My sister had this talent for making her problems feel like your responsibility. She didn't ask for help so much as she arranged circumstances until helping her felt like the only reasonable option. She borrowed money and forgot about it the way other people forget umbrellas. She had a boyfriend nobody in the family liked. A man named, well, it doesn't matter what his name was. What matters is that he had the kind of eyes that were always calculating something, always figuring out what a room was worth. I didn't trust him. I told her that once. She didn't speak to me for 6 weeks. On the morning everything fell apart, I was not thinking about any of this. I was sitting in the waiting area of BC Children's Hospital with my hands folded in my lap, watching a fish tank that nobody was watching, while my daughter, my 12-year-old, who had been complaining about stomach pain for 2 weeks that I had attributed to school anxiety, was in surgery for an appendix that had ruptured. My son was sitting beside me. He was on his laptop, which I had barely registered because he is always on his laptop and I was not in a place to manage anyone else's behavior. I was just trying to breathe. My phone buzzed with a banking notification. I almost ignored it. I opened it because my hands needed something to do. The balance in the joint account was 0. I stared at the number. I actually tipped my phone toward the light, as if the angle was the problem. $0.00. The account had held $260,000 at 7 o'clock that morning. I had checked it, habit, before leaving the house in the panic of getting my daughter to emergency. I opened the transaction history, a single wire transfer time-stamped 4 hours earlier to an account I didn't recognize, the full balance, and then, sitting one notification below it, a text message from my sister. Audrey, I'm so sorry. I needed to start over. You'll be okay. You always are. Tell Mom I love her. My son looked over at my face and closed his laptop immediately. He didn't ask what was wrong. He just said, Mom, show me. I should tell you about my son because this story doesn't make sense without understanding who he is. His name is Fletcher, and he has been the kind of quiet, watchful child who notices everything and says very little. His father was a software developer before the divorce, and whatever talent lived in those genes went straight to Fletcher without dilution. He was coding at 9. At 13, he started finding security vulnerabilities in apps as a hobby and reporting them through official channels because I had raised him to do things the right way. At 17, he is calm in a way that occasionally frightens me, the way still water over a very deep drop is calm. He read my notification. He read the text. He handed my phone back to me and said, quietly, "Give me a little while." "Fletcher," I said, "this isn't a problem you can fix." He looked at me with an expression I recognized from his father. That particular brand of patience that means I know something you don't yet, and I'm choosing not to argue about it. I'm not going to do anything wrong, he said. I just need to look. I sat with the fish tank for another hour. A surgeon came out to tell me my daughter was out of surgery and stable and sleeping. I cried in the hallway. I pulled myself together in the bathroom. I came back and sat next to Fletcher, who was still typing, and I asked him what he had found. He turned the laptop toward me. She didn't transfer the money to a bank, he said. She transferred it to a currency exchange platform, the kind people use when they're trying to convert CAD to euros fast. I found the platform from the routing information in your notification. He pulled up a second window. She booked a flight this morning, Porter to Toronto, then TAP Air Portugal to Lisbon. She's in the air right now. I felt the blood drop out of my face. How do you know about the flight? Her boyfriend posted a story on Instagram 40 minutes ago. He tagged the Air Canada lounge at Pearson. Fletcher adjusted his glasses. They connected to Toronto. They're probably boarding right now. Fletcher, how did you even find his Instagram? You have a photo with her from 2 Christmases ago on your phone's shared album. He's in the background. Reverse image search from there. He said it the way someone might explain how they'd found a good parking spot. Simple, obvious, already done. I sat very still. My daughter was asleep down a hallway. My sister was 30,000 feet in the air with my money and her boyfriend, and apparently a plan. And my 17-year-old was doing something on a laptop that he kept telling me wasn't wrong. What are you doing? I asked. Right now? He looked at the screen. I'm building her a very convincing version of a currency exchange confirmation. She thinks the funds are sitting in an offshore holding account waiting to be released in euros when she lands. He paused. They're not. I wrote a script that intercepts the platform's confirmation API and mirrors the display on her end. From her phone, it looks like the money is sitting there. It isn't. The real transfer hit a processing queue that I flagged with a fraud hold. I stared at him. You flagged it how? The platform has a public API endpoint for fraud reporting. I submitted a report with the transaction ID 20 minutes ago. They freeze flagged transactions automatically pending review. The money hasn't moved from the platform yet. It's frozen. He looked up at me. She doesn't know that. Her phone still shows a confirmed balance. Is that legal? Filing a fraud report about actual fraud is legal, yes. He said it without any edge. Just fact. And the mirroring thing? He was quiet for a second. I'm not touching her money. I'm not redirecting anything. I'm just making sure she sees what she expects to see long enough for the fraud review to complete and for you to contact a lawyer and the police. He closed the laptop halfway. I set a timer. When she tries to initiate a withdrawal from that platform, the mirror collapses. She'll see the real screen, the frozen screen, and there will be a contact number for the fraud department. I thought about my mother, who didn't know any of this was happening, who was probably at her apartment watching the news and drinking tea, who had spent 30 years cleaning other people's houses so that her daughters could have something better. I thought about my daughters sleeping down the hall. I thought about $240,000 and $40,000 and a text message that said, "You'll be okay, you always are." I picked up my phone and called the police non-emergency line. Then I called my lawyer, who I have on speed dial because I am a mortgage broker and some days you just need your lawyer on speed dial. Then I called my bank's fraud department. Fletcher sat beside me the whole time answering questions I didn't know the answers to about transaction IDs and routing numbers and timestamps. His voice completely steady, while I held my phone and tried to hold myself together. My sister didn't call me when she landed. She texted 2 words, "Made it." I didn't respond. I was at the hospital watching my daughter eat orange Jell-O and complain about the IV in her arm, and I had made a decision not to tip my hand. The call came 36 hours later. I was home. Fletcher was at the kitchen table. My daughter was on the couch under a blanket with strict instructions to rest, which she was interpreting loosely by watching something on her iPad at a volume I was pretending not to notice. My phone lit up with my sister's number, and Fletcher looked up and said, "She tried to withdraw." I answered on speaker. She was not screaming at first. She was doing the thing she always did. The voice that went soft and confused. The voice that made everything feel like a misunderstanding. "Audrey, there's something wrong with the account. I'm trying to access the funds, and there's a message about a fraud hold." Can you call the platform and explain that it was a legitimate transfer? It's been 2 days and I know about the hold, I said. Silence. I filed the fraud report, I said. Fletcher found the transaction within 2 hours of you leaving. The funds have been frozen since before you landed. The soft voice was gone, but replaced it with something I'd actually heard before, at the edges, at Christmas dinners, in parking lots after family events. This sharp, pressurized anger that she had always managed to keep mostly contained. It was not contained now. She told me I had ruined her life. She told me I had always been jealous of her, that I had always wanted to see her fail, that I was controlling and selfish and that she had borrowed money that she fully intended to repay, that $240,000 was nothing to someone like me, that she had been suffering for years while I sat in my nice apartment and collected my commissions and never once asked if she was okay. I let her finish. Fletcher was watching me with that still, careful expression. You forged my name on a property transfer document, I said. I have the document. My lawyer has the document. The police have a copy. She made a sound I'd never heard from her before. You used our joint account to wire funds without my authorization, I continued. That's fraud. Your boyfriend is implicated as well, because he's been posting your location on social media since you landed, and that's going to be very useful information. You can't. Audrey, we're family. You cannot do this to family. Fletcher looked at the table. My daughter, from the couch, had gone very quiet. Come home, I said. Come home and speak to the police voluntarily, and I will ask my lawyer to note your cooperation. Or stay in Lisbon and have Interpol involved. Your choice. You have 48 hours. I ended the call. My daughter appeared in the kitchen doorway, trailing her blanket. Was that Auntie? Yes, I said. She sounded really upset. She is. My daughter considered this with the particular seriousness of a 12-year-old who has just had surgery and feels that this entitles her to be included in adult information. Did she do something bad? I looked at Fletcher. He looked at me. Yes, I said. She did something very bad and we're handling it. My daughter nodded slowly. Fletcher fixed it, didn't he? It wasn't a question. Fletcher turned slightly pink and looked at his laptop. He started it, I said. We all finished it together. What I hadn't told my sister, what Fletcher had set up and not explained to me until afterward, which I am still processing, was the second layer. When the mirror collapsed and she saw the frozen account, it didn't just show a fraud hold message. It showed a detailed summary, the flagged transaction, the reported routing information, the timestamp of the fraud report, and a note that said the account activity had been forwarded to the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center and to FinTrack for review. Fletcher had automatically generated and submitted that notification at the same moment her withdrawal attempt triggered the mirror collapse. She wasn't just locked out of the money, she was in a file. Her boyfriend, it turned out, had 2 prior fraud convictions in Ontario that had not been disclosed to my sister or, apparently, to anyone he'd been involved with since. When the RCMP looked into the flagged transaction and found his name connected to the account as a third-party beneficiary because he had been named as a recipient for the euro conversion, they ran his background immediately. The Portugal trip became considerably more complicated for him than it had been for my sister. My sister came home. I don't know exactly what happened in Lisbon in those 48 hours, and I haven't asked, because some information is not useful to have. She came home and she spoke to the RCMP and she cooperated fully, and her boyfriend did not come with her and has not, to my knowledge, returned to Canada. My lawyer negotiated a repayment agreement. The funds were unfrozen and returned to my account within 11 days of the original transfer. She was charged. I did not ask for those charges to be dropped, which was the hardest thing I did through all of it, because part of me still remembered being 8 years old and sharing a bedroom with her, still remembered her teaching me to braid hair, still remembered every version of her that came before this one. But the woman who sent me a text message while my daughter was in surgery, while I was sitting in a hospital waiting room with my hands folded in my lap, that woman needed to understand what she had done. Suspended sentence, restitution, 2 years probation. Her lawyer told my lawyer she was devastated by my decision not to intervene. I believe she was. My mother found out. Of course she did. She called me crying, not at me. Just crying, the way she cried when she was overwhelmed and didn't know where to put it. I sat on my kitchen floor and let her cry. And I didn't say anything bad about my sister because my mother is not responsible for who her children became. I just said, I'm okay, Mama. We're all okay. She flew from Burnaby to stay with us for a week, and she and my daughter watched game shows together. And my mother taught Fletcher how to make her pierogi recipe, and for a few days the apartment smelled like butter and dough, and something that felt like butter and dough, and something that felt like being held. I never touched the condo plan. I moved the funds into my own account, separated and labeled clearly, and I am still going to buy my mother that place in Burnaby. It will just be entirely mine now, and she will know that, and maybe that's actually better. Maybe something given freely with no debt attached to it is worth more than something given in partnership. Fletcher asked me once, a few weeks after everything settled, if I was angry at him for doing what he did without asking me first. We were in the car, picking up groceries, and he asked it very carefully, like he had been holding the question for a while. I thought about it honestly before I answered. You bought me time, I said. And you didn't do anything you weren't allowed to do. You reported fraud. You built something that showed your aunt exactly what she had coming. I looked at him. You had two choices. You could have told me and watched me fall apart before I had the information to act, or you could act first and tell me when I was ready to hear it. I paused. You made the right call. He nodded. He looked out the window. I didn't want her to get away with it, he said quietly. Not because of the money. Because of you sitting there in that waiting room, not knowing. I didn't say anything for a moment. She should have known better than to do it when you were already having a bad day, he added very seriously. I laughed. It was the first real laugh in weeks, and it startled us both, and it felt like something releasing. There is a version of the story where I tell you I have forgiven my sister. I haven't, not fully, not yet. I don't know if I will. Forgiveness is not a switch, and I am skeptical of anyone who tells you it is. What I have done is make a decision about what my life is going to look like from here, and she is not in it, at least not for now. Maybe that changes, maybe it doesn't. I've stopped making promises to myself about things I can't control. What I do know is this. I am sitting in my apartment in Vancouver with a good cup of coffee and my daughter's voice coming from down the hall and my son somewhere behind a closed door doing something I only partially understand with a laptop that probably knows more about the world than I ever will. My accounts are full. My mother is coming to visit next month. The condo search is back on. You cannot save people who have decided your life is a resource they're entitled to draw from. You can only close the account and protect what's actually yours. If you've ever had to do that with a sibling, a parent, a friend, anyone, you know how much it costs, even when it's the right thing. Leave a red heart in the comments if you believe that protecting yourself is not the same as being selfish. Like and subscribe if you want more stories about the people who find their footing after the fall. You deserve to be the one who gets back up. I keep coming back to the hospital waiting room. The fish tank nobody was watching. My hands folded in my lap like I was holding something together by sheer pressure. My daughter was in surgery and I didn't know it yet, but my sister was already in the air. What strikes me now is the timing. She chose that morning on purpose, or maybe she didn't. Maybe it was just convenience. But either way, she knew I would be distracted. She knew I would be scared. She chose the moment I was least able to fight back, and she took everything she could carry. That's not a misunderstanding or a lapse in judgment. That's a decision. And decisions like that don't come out of nowhere. They come from a long, quiet history of believing that someone else's life is yours to draw from. I spent a long time being the kind of person who made that easy for her. I told myself it was loyalty, it was love, it was what you do for family. But I think, looking back honestly, it was also a failure of honesty, mine, toward myself. I saw the signs and I chose the more comfortable explanation every time. That's not something I'm proud of, and it's not something I can blame on her. What Fletcher did, and I still sit with this because it wasn't simple, was something I couldn't have done. Not because I lack the technical knowledge, though I do, but because I was sitting in that waiting room, convincing myself not to fall apart, and he was 17 years old at a hospital table, quietly building something that would hold. That kind of clarity, the ability to think carefully and act precisely when everything around you is chaos, that's not just intelligence. It's a quality of character. It's the difference between knowing what's right and actually doing it when it costs you something to do it. He didn't have to tell me afterward that he'd been careful to stay within what was legal. He didn't have to explain his reasoning. He did anyway because he wanted me to understand, not just to trust him. That mattered to me more than I told him at the time. The restitution came through. The account balance is whole. My mother still doesn't entirely understand what happened, and I've decided that's okay. What she understands is that her granddaughter recovered, and that the condo search is back on, and that I brought her pierogi supplies the last time I visited because Fletcher has been making them better than either of us expected. My sister made her choices. The consequences followed from those choices in a direct, unbroken line. I didn't engineer her outcome. I just stopped absorbing it for her. There is a version of strength that looks like endurance, staying, absorbing, forgiving before anything has actually changed. I used to think that was the version I was supposed to have. I don't think that anymore. Real resilience, the kind that actually sustains you, is knowing when the thing you've been holding isn't yours to hold. It's having the integrity to stop covering for someone else's damage. It's getting back up, not because you have no other choice, but because you've decided, clearly and with full information, that your life is worth that effort. I'm still deciding a lot of things. That part doesn't feel finished. But I'm deciding them from solid ground, and that's more than I had in that waiting room, and that's enough for now.